Liver of sulphur is one of those things where there's a lot of conflicting information out there on it. So some people say it's acidic, some people say it isn't, some people say that it's highly toxic, some people say it isn't. So we're going to have a little chat about it and the different ways that you can use it and the different ways that you can find it. But generally speaking, liver of sulphur is like a trade name, and it's actually potassium sulfide, or made up of potassium sulfides. And that's partly why there's all this, you know, conflicting information, because there isn't any real regulation on, you know, the exact mix, the exact strength, and that's what can cause, you know, all the confusion around toxicity and things like that. So because of all the misinformation, certainly in terms of whether or not it's acidic, I've got some litmus paper. Regardless of how toxic or non-toxic it is, there's obviously some basic safety precautions that are worth doing, and one is have something on your hands, some gloves, because regardless of whether or not it's toxic, it stinks. It absolutely stinks of eggs because it's sulphur, and you don't want to have stinky fingers for the rest of the day. So always recommend using gloves, or at least doing it in a way where you know your hands are not going to be coming into contact with it. The other thing is, some people say that you must wear goggles, and again, whether or not it's highly toxic, if you get anything in your eyes other than plain water, it's never good. So eye protection is always worth it. And then some people say you must wear a mask, but that wouldn't be a dust mask like this. It would have to be one for fumes, and it would have to be for the correct fumes. I don't wear a mask when using it. I just make sure that I'm in a room that's large enough, has free flowing air, you know, or good extraction, or do it outside. Because like I say, I've never had personally any issues with it. I've never had any complaints with students in it. I just always say I would never lean over it and take a big sniff. Just, you know, you wouldn't want to, it stinks. So like I say, just make sure it's a nice open room, you've got some airflow, open window, something like that. Some people use fans, or go and pop outside to a larger area. And for, like I say, the standard bottles that you get, that should be completely fine. The one that Kernowcraft sells, apparently it's actually put in as a bathing liquid to simulate the sulphur springs in Japan. So I think in terms of toxicity, it's very much down to the exact mix that you buy. So it comes in different forms. Like I say, one of the most popular is a pre-mixed little bottle. We'd still water this down with liquid, but it's got a little dropper and it's very easy to use. One of the other ways you can get it is as solid rock form, and I'm not going to open this up because one of the downsides of the rock form is you have to pre-mix it, but actually if these get too hot or they get a bit moist in the tub, then they no longer work. So you've got to really look after them. And then you can get slightly different mixes, such as this. So this isn't potassium sulfide. This is ammonium hydrosulfide, which is being sold as an oxidizing agent. In America, one of the most popular ones is called Jack's Black, which again, they all have the unique mixes. So in terms of use and health and safety, you would always just look up the exact details of whatever it is you've chosen to buy. And lastly, in here, I've got 2 hard-boiled eggs, which also stink. They weren't rotten, but they weren't exactly fresh. They were a few weeks old, and I boiled them to within an inch of their lives, and I've popped them in a little Tupperware. So I'm going to put some metal in here as well and leave it, and I'll show you how it comes out later. It's the same smell, same sulphurs coming off. I don't know why I'm sniffing it, I can't smell it through the Tupperware. But the difference is it's going to take a lot longer, but I thought we might as well have a go and you can see the difference. So in a second, I'm going to move the camera and I'm going to run you through different ways that you can use it and different things that you can try, and then at the end we'll have a little compare and contrast to see how they worked. Okay, so here I have a little yogurt pot, and in this side there's just some fresh cold water, and in this side there's some more water. But what I'm going to do is take my bottle of liver sulphur and put a few drops in here. So that was about 6. Generally speaking, the stronger the solution, the quicker it'll work. I'm going to give that a little mix. And then at the same time in here I've got some warm water. And I'm going to put a few drops in, a few more because I've got more water in this jar. Do a little squirt. Give it a little mix up. There we go. Right, so now anything that I put into the cold solution will take a bit of time for the colour to develop. But in theory, pick up anything that I put into the hot solution should develop a lot quicker. Now with a cold or weaker solution, the colours develop a lot slower, and that's where you can potentially get a range of rainbow colours developing. So the end colour, when the process is finished, is sort of a grey-black, like we said, but for it to get to that stage it goes through a range of rainbow colours, starting with a goldy sort of sheen, and then it goes through to more of a reddy orange, and then it starts to develop into sort of a bluey purple, and then finally finishing with the grey-black. Like I say, if you use a colder solution or a weaker solution, you've got more control over that, so you can see it's going a bit more orangey, and pop it back in because the colours are developing a lot slower compared to this one. If I can get it out. Added a few more drops because my liver of sulphur solution was very old. And there we go. It's already gone quite dark. Like so. Whereas our weaker solution is just starting to turn. So I'm going to leave that a little bit longer. And I'm going to pop some brass in there as well, so you can see how that comes out. It's normally a good idea when you're waiting for your colours to develop is every now and again take it out of the solution, give it a rinse, and then, not that I'm going to be able to do this one-handed, give it a little scrub with a brass brush. And then pop it back in for a bit more. I've taken all the pieces out and put them in some clean fresh water, and in a minute I'm going to show them to you. I'll show you the difference and show you how to finish them a little bit, but before I do that I want to talk to you about this, because a lot of the books and websites and advice you'll come across will say that once you've finished using liver of sulphur, it's really important to neutralise your pieces with bicarb. So this is a little mixture of water and bicarb, but as far as I was aware, liver of sulphur is not acidic, so we've got some little bit of paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is test the weaker solution. So if I pop this in here a little second, focus, there we go, it's gone a pale green, which is neutral. So the bicarb's alkaline stroke neutral as well, base. So if you look at this little scale, number 1, the reds, are acidic, and then number 13, 14 are alkaline. So the majority of the liver of sulphur mix are in the middle, sort of a base neutral green colour. So here's the middle of the scale. Going up to a greeny blue, which is a little bit more alkaline with these two, But if you look at the bicarb, it's actually darker, it's more alkaline than the plain water. So if you wanted to neutralise, if you wanted to make something that was very alkaline a tiny bit more acidic, actually the water's going to do a better job. And you're certainly not going to make it less acidic because it's not acidic to begin with. It's alkaline. Here we go. So here is the hot strong solution. You can see they went very dark, very blacky grey straight away. These were all pieces of copper. So copper and silver tend to react fairly similarly. And this was the brass. Brass takes a lot longer. You can use liver of sulphur on brass as a patina, but I've never had a huge amount of luck with it. So if you like using brass, you can see there's a bit of a rainbow colour. Let me know. Let me know how you get on and if there's any tips and tricks to it. These ones are the ones in the colder, weaker solutions. So again, we've got some copper, and you can see it's managed to build up those iridescent rainbow colours because the process was a lot slower. Piece of silver, look at that. But again, on the brass, not so much. And also, this is a good example. Can you see my fingerprint? When you do this on your metal, it really needs to be a finished piece of jewellery, because if you start working it afterwards, you're going to lose the colour. You certainly don't want to be soldering or anything like that. But also, if you've polished it or then handled it with your fingers, if there's any greasy residue, that is going to act as a barrier and stop the process from happening. So your work really does need to be as clean and grease-free as possible before you pop it into the solutions. And people have different ways of doing that. So some people use, bicarb on a little old toothbrush and give it a scrub, or some fine wire wool, or some sandpaper, and then just give it a good wash. But then try not to handle it, because otherwise this might happen. Here's the one with the coffee. So the coffee is supposed to help you get the rainbow colours. I've not tried it before. You can see there are some sort of bluey, peacocky colours in there. This one at the front that's the most blue was silver. And then these ones were bronze and copper. And here's a little spinner. So the main band was silver, and you can see those peacocky colours. And the pearl wire was silver, and then it was brass in the middle, so you can see the brass hasn't really picked up the colour again. But again, I did this one on purpose, where I just gave it a very quick clean, but you can see where I've sanded the edges and got a lovely uniform colour, lovely blues, but where that sanding mop didn't reach to the middle of the ring, the colour hasn't taken at all. So that just shows how important it is for your metal to be nice and clean and grease-free. I brought the silver bar that was done in the cold solution outside so you can see those colours even better. I've got everything from bright emerald greens to sapphire blues, a bit of turquoise, a bit of purple. It's come out lovely. Right, so next up I'm going to show you how you can finish them, give them a little bit of a sheen. But like I say, unfortunately, because all these colours are just on the surface, it's a way of speeding up the tarnishing process really. They're never going to last forever, especially on rings that get all rubbed on tables and stuff like that. But they'll last for a while, and they're very fun and very pretty to play with. There's a few ways that you can highlight some of the areas on your piece, and one of the most popular is by using some very, very fine wire wool. So this is I think this is 00, but ideally you'd want 0, so the finest that you can get. Door's creaking. So I'm going to take the little wire wool and I'm just going to give the surface a quick buff. And what this should do is remove some of the black from the high points, making them a little bit shiny, and highlighting the texture, because the recessed textured areas will stay fairly black as long as I don't push too hard with this. You can see it. There you go. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is using the polishing papers that Kernowcraft sent me. So here we go. So I've got the little pack, the sample pack of polishing papers, and the stick that I stuck the shiny ones to the other day. So I'm going to take this and I'll go for this one now, a bit of textured copper, and I'm going to go for the number 4, so they're fairly smooth but not the smoothest, and I'm just going to rub it, and again it should start to highlight the raised areas and keeping the recesses nice and coloured. But the good thing about the polishing papers is, because this is a more subtle coloration, it shouldn't remove all the colour from the high surfaces. It should just shine it up a little bit. Like so. There we go. Right, next up, brass brush. So, got my little copper leaf, got a brass brush. I'm going to wet it. You always want to use a brass brush wet. And then I'm going to scrub it on my leaf. And again, it's just making it nice and shiny, but it's not stripping away too much of the colour. It's helping to highlight the texture a little bit. The coarser the brush or the harder you push, the more it will take away. Here we go. With my lovely rainbow silver, I'm going to use the smoothest of polishing papers because I want to keep as much of that colour as possible. Just giving it a light buff, very gentle. It's making the textured areas come up beautifully. Right, and then what I'm going to do to make the sides a bit shinier, I'm going to take my burnisher, or you can use a teaspoon, so some polished steel, and I'm going to rub it on my edges, and it should make them super shiny and super smooth. Just careful not to slip and scratch yourself or your work with the point. You can always stick some masking tape on there. There we go. So you can see where that polishing paper on the buff stick has picked up the high areas, but you've still got those flashes of blues and greens within it. And then, where did I do it? If I turn this over, you can see how shiny that edge has started to go from where I've been rubbing it with this. So just to show you on the other side, see it's dull at the minute. I'm going to take my burnisher or teaspoon and I'm going to rub it on that edge. It'll come up nice and shiny. There we go. So traditional antiquing, that blacky grey, but then it's been buffed back a little bit. That's how it looks before it was buffed back. Slightly more rainbow colours. Very flashy with the blues and the greens. And again, slightly buffed back, but a lot darker, more similar to this one. All these are copper. This one was a piece of silver, all done with liver of sulphur. Have a play, have an experiment, see how you get on, try hot, cold, different strengths, try mixing it with other things such as the coffee, or other things that you can mix it with are plain household ammonia, and then with or without salt. Other things that people suggest are using deionized water, filtered water, rather than normal tap water, because obviously everybody's tap water has different, you know, minerals and things in it, different hardness, which can affect it. Whether or not your metal's greasy or has fingertip marks on can affect it. There's so many things. And later on in the project we're going to look at some more advanced colouring of metal as well. So I'm going to run through some books with you in a minute. And like I say, none of the colours, because they're on the surface of the metal, are going to last forever, but there's things you can do about that to help slow down the process. In America it's quite common to lacquer work, so to use a paint on or spray on varnish. It's not quite so common over here in the UK. What we tend to use are things like Renaissance wax. So this is a hard wax. It costs a little bit of money, but oh my goodness does it last forever. I've had this for years, I've hardly used any of it, and it has been used quite a bit. So this just acts as a little barrier to stop the tarnishing process from happening as quickly. The downside of this though is because it's wax based, what I've found in the past is, for example, I've had a pair of brass earrings that I made, I put the Renaissance wax on it and they stayed shiny for months and months and months and months and months, and then as soon as we had a heat wave like today, the wax obviously melted and they just tarnished really quickly. So Kernowcraft have sent me a little sample bottle of Midas sealant, which is similar to the lacquers. So I've not used this before, I'm going to give it a little go next month and I'll do a compare and contrast between the Midas and the Renaissance wax so that you can see the difference. And the other thing we're going to look at, because liver of sulphur is just one of the the more common ways of colouring metal, but all the things like this, like the coffee and the ammonia and the salt, can be used to do more advanced colouring or patinas. So this is a really good book. I know it's back to front, sorry. And it's full of lots of useful information, but one of my favourite pages is about how to colour metals, and it's like a little recipe book. So that's showing different colours that you can get on different metals and how to achieve them. So it's well worth grabbing a copy of this if you haven't already got one. You can get them from all over. And I'm going to show you another book now. And this is the all-encompassing encyclopedia of colouring metal. I'll put the names of these books in the comments because, like I said, I know that the camera flips them in the back to front, but pretty colours. So we've done quite a lot of this sort of colouring in the past, but it tends to take a few days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down next month and do some proper photo tutorials, as well as a couple of little videos, just so that you can really see the step-by-step process, because like I say, it's not a quick and easy one like the liver of sulphur, but you can get some really, really gorgeous and interesting colours from it. But like with this, they're just on the surface of the metal, so they're always going to be vulnerable to, they're always going to tarnish, they're going to rub off if you rub them on things, but they're good for staying in recesses, or for example if you're making a little pendant or pair of domed earrings maybe, because they get that little bit of protection. Next month we're going to be looking at cold connections, so they're ways of attaching metal together and making jewellery without needing to use a blowtorch, without needing to use heat. So because of that, this is when I'm going to be looking into the colouring a little bit more. And at Christmas I was given this book and these colouring pencils, because you can get beautiful effects on metal using these, and I haven't had time to open them or have a play yet, so I'm going to use it as an excuse. I expect you guys to hold me accountable. I have to crack these out and have a go and show you how I get on, because I was given them 6 months ago and I keep meaning to have a play with them. But anyway, let me know how you got on. I will let you know how these eggs... Ooh, it is starting to do something. 2 seconds. They're starting to turn.